week. 500,000 people added to the United Kingdom population in the year to June. I'm delighted to be joined now by the political editor of the Daily Express, David Maddox. And David, first of all, I suppose to some extent these numbers weren't a huge surprise. We know that we've taken on 100,000 plus Ukrainians, 100,000 plus Hong Kongers fleeing tyranny. To some extent, this was an aberrational year. But what was your reaction to those numbers we saw yesterday?
I think the problem is that it feeds into a bigger picture of a government that's just lost control of the borders issue. And that's the trouble. And yes, absolutely, we needed to be taking those people from Hong Kong. We needed to be taking those people from Ukraine. These were very special circumstances. Hong Kong in particular, I think we owed legacy reasons for those people to come here for protection. But it's this bigger picture, and that was obviously legal migration. But on the other hand, we have the problem of illegal migration coming across the channel, and there's just this wider perspective that the government that promised to take back control of our borders with Brexit has singularly failed to do so in any regard.
Do you think that Rishi Sunak, when he answers these questions about the level of migration, and he says in a phrase that we've come to know quite well, he needs to deal with illegal migration first before thinking about the numbers of legal migration, do you think that that's a sort of soundbite that will land well with the people of the United Kingdom?
I think people have just numbed to it now, actually. I think, we've had 12 years of Conservative leaders and prime ministers promising to tackle illegal migration and bring down legal migration. Right back to David Cameron setting targets. I think it was 100,000 net for David Cameron on legal migration. We've just had, Theresa May said it, Boris Johnson said it, now Rishi's saying it. People have stopped believing it. Certainly we've run a couple of polls lately, and the degree of scepticism to migration control measures is huge. We're talking about 6 in 10, 7 in 10 voters. And the problem is I think people want to sort of stop hearing words and actually just see some actual action, instead of their local hotels jam-packed with illegal migrants, for example.
Yeah, I think the really evocative thing here is the sense of a lack of control over that illegal migration higher than we've ever had recorded. Perhaps 50,000 this year coming in small boats with no sort of control or process there. But if we look at the detail of the legal migration numbers we saw yesterday, the Office for National Statistics released not this graphic. If we could just get to the next graphic first, which is from the Office for National Statistics, which just showed the difference of the levels of migration. 150,000 coming for work, but considerably higher numbers coming for student visas. See there, the light blue line. Those coming to study was the largest number, around 270,000 people. And if we go to the next graphic now, we can see that actually, amongst the British public, very few people think that students, who come, of course, for 3 years or so and then mostly leave again, very few people think that those numbers should be included in the overall migration total. So perhaps, are we looking at this the wrong way? That 500,000 number, if we don't look at students within it, perhaps that's actually quite a bit lower.
That was one of the arguments Theresa May regularly put forward, that we should just take the student numbers out of this, and that would actually bring the figures down to a more realistic migration total. There was always a great deal of scepticism about that, because actually many of the students then stay on and find work and so forth. And it was very hard to actually track who was staying on and who was not staying on. I noticed yesterday that Rishi Sunak was actually talking about cutting the number of student visas, which is, potentially a way to deal with it, actually. I mean, I know the university sector loves the money coming in from abroad, so, there's some balance to be had there. But what that graph also shows is that this idea that we need massive migration for the jobs and for economic growth is questionable in that sense. If a majority of them are coming, or a large proportion of them coming for education reasons as opposed to work reasons, then it perhaps questions the model of the people who are proposing and supporting open borders.
Yes, I suppose it also points to the fact that only 150,000 out of that 500,000 are coming for those jobs under the new points-based system. Perhaps that explains, to some extent, some of those labour shortages that we're seeing. It's not actually 500,000 people coming to plug skills gaps. It's only 150,000 coming to plug skills gaps. A really interesting breakdown there. I wonder what's the next step, though. It seems that the Labour Party and the Conservative Party are now so similar, both on the issue of migration. They're saying sort of the same platitudes as they did at the start of this week at the Confederation of British Industry. Is there really a cigarette paper that we can put between both parties on this?
No, I mean, Keir Starmer's definitely moved to the right on this issue in terms of his rhetoric. But again, if you look at the small print, he's still offering more work visas. And again, as I say, I think platitudes is the right way to put it. We've had 12 years of Conservative governments and Conservative leaders, Home Secretaries, saying that they're going to bring this under control and reduce it. And in fact, what's happened is we're getting record numbers. I mean, we're 500,000 people. We're talking about a couple of Coventries, aren't we? Each year, and that's an enormous amount to try and house, to try and provide services for, when we're already struggling anyway. I mean, your previous section on what's going on with the NHS is, this all feeds into the strain on public services, despite the extra investment, despite the extra doctors and nurses. It's, this is part of a problem in the country. The country is creaking in terms of what it can offer people in terms of services, in terms of housing, and, and the whole cost of living issue. So, they've got to stop with the words and actually tackle the problem in the end, or else, others are going to start moving into a political void that's been left by the main parties.
Yeah, it's interesting to see Nigel Farage making more and more sort of hints towards returning to that arena. We'll have to watch this space. But for now, David Maddox, political editor of the Daily Express, thank you very much for joining us on the briefing this morning. Really interesting stuff there.